Welcome in to Picks and Parlays on the Sports Byline Broadcast Network and also streaming on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm your host, Chelsa Messinger. You can find me every day on Twitter. My handle is just my name, at Chelsa Messinger. You can also find us on all of your favorite social media platforms. If you search Picks and Parlays, we're really easy to find. If you want to give us a shout, drop us a line, complain about our picks, whatever you want to do. We've got a great show lined up for you guys today. We're starting off with March Madness. Everything you need to know about betting the NCAA tournament, who to pick, what patterns to follow, what to look for when deciding your bracket and your plays when it comes to the tournament. College basketball, really fun this year. There's a lot of teams kind of in the mix for that top seed overall. Over the weekend, a lot of big upsets. 3 of the top 4 projected number 1 seeds all falling. Gonzaga, Baylor, San Diego State all losing. So it's really shaping up to be an interesting stretch down the pipe. Even though I will say Baylor lost to Kansas, which is a number 1 seed in their own right. We're also talking NBA with Tony T. More than halfway done with the NBA season. Who are the teams that we can trust when it comes to betting and betting against the spread? And we're talking some totals as well. Some of these totals are climbing into outrageous numbers. Like 240, it seems really high, but some of these teams are scoring a lot of points. Like one of the games we're covering today, Bucks and Wizards. The total's 240.5. But guess what? The last time they met, the score was 151 to 131. Yeah, if you do math, yeah, that's a really high total. So we've got a lot to get to. A lot of basketball. Gonna be fun. We're back after the break talking NCAA March Madness betting tips on Picks and Parlays. Stick with us. Welcome back to Picks and Parlays on the Sports Byline Broadcast Network and also streaming on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We're here every weekday if you want to join us for some sports betting action and analysis, talk, everything you want to know about this week's games. We got you covered. I'm your host, Chelsa Messinger. Check me out on Twitter, at Chelsa Messinger, if you want to drop me a line or a parlay. Big fan of those. Right now, we're diving into some college basketball because March Madness is right around the corner. And you guessed it, we're talking about betting in the NCAA tournament. Craig Trapp is joining us for some March Madness talk. How are you doing, Craig?
Yeah, exciting weekend, just a few weekends before March Madness. And what a better time to start thinking about how we're going to make money with the big dance coming up.
We talked about futures a couple weeks back. Maybe it was a couple weeks. Maybe it was just a week. And I remember you talking about Creighton. Wow, what a pick. The value on the future for them has to be getting even better because they've had quite the run as of late. They just beat Butler by 22 today. They've got 3 big-time road wins, beating Nova, Seton Hall, and Marquette all on the road. So they're one of the teams to watch. What else are we thinking when it comes to March Madness in some of the strategies and how to bet it, and maybe some teams that people aren't thinking about?
Well, first of all, I always say the NCAA bracket process is unbelievable. We all get excited about it. Everybody fills out the brackets, and that is fun to do. But you got to put that's separate betting than betting as far as against the spread, betting money line against the spread or totals on an individual game basis. So I always say scrap the brackets when it comes time to place your bets for the opening week 4 days of the tournament, because you can really go crazy if all of a sudden you start following your bracket because you pulled a couple big upsets and now you're putting some crazy money on that. So for number one, I always say scrap the brackets, put the brackets aside. Not saying don't do one. I do one. Everyone does one. Submit them. You can go undefeated and win $1 million from some of these places that you can submit them, but don't go crazy when it comes to betting your brackets.
Do you bet the NCAA tournament any differently than you do some of these day-to-day games? Is there anything different? Obviously, we've seen in the past some of these Cinderella teams coming out of nowhere to beat some of the big teams, and it's a little different than the playoffs in other sports, and that some teams, the little Cinderella schools, can come out of nowhere and beat these huge blue blood teams, not like football where Alabama's not going to get beat by Seton Hall or whoever these schools are. How do you bet differently when it comes to the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I have 3 words I live by come NCAA tournament time: underdogs, underdogs, underdogs. Because very seldom can you make money just betting the favorites come NCAA tournament time. Now, that's always the case for us handicappers. You probably bet more underdogs than you do favorites, but in the NCAA tournament, it's even more likely. Like you say, you see the big the big schools get beat by the smaller schools. The Loyola Chicago that had an unbelievable run a few years back. You have the VCUs of past George Mason. We've seen it. It happens over and over. And even when they don't win, a lot of times they cover. So I always, every game I look at, I'm looking for the underdogs, especially when it comes to, like you said, the big conferences versus smaller conferences, because the mid-major conferences that maybe go overlooked in the regular season, now they have their chance. Usually those are the top teams from their conferences. Usually they've won the conference tournament, and they know how to win come tournament time. And I love betting those smaller conferences versus the big conferences, and that usually leads us to underdogs, underdogs, underdogs.
Right, and that's kind of twofold in the fact that you get more value when you're placing your money on teams that aren't the Blue Bloods. And get this stat, only 2 number 1 teams who are ranked number 1 at the end of the season have gone on to win it all in the last 24 years. So it gives you a grain of salt with some of these rankings and some of these schools that are ranked number 1 going into the tournament. Number 1 doesn't always win, and obviously you're not going to get good value with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's an exceptional part of course, handicapping is, what do you think the value, what do you think the number really should be if you took the front of the teams off the front of the jerseys? And that is, you have to, that's built into the bias. So the big schools, the North Carolinas, the Dukes, Michigan States, all those big names, UCLA's, they get extra points, sometimes as a favor, most times as a favorite, sometimes even as an underdog. So you have to take that into consideration, and that's why underdogs do so much better come NCAA tournament time.
What else do you look for when you're looking for teams that might make a deep run in the tournament? We saw in baseball this season that sometimes it's not always the team that's best on paper, but the team that gets the hottest. We saw it with the Washington Nationals. In the middle of the season, they weren't even projected to make the playoffs, but then they won it all just because they got hot at the right time. Is that the case sometimes in March Madness? Is that something you look for, recent form?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we saw it, with Carmelo Anthony going all the way back to when Syracuse, they got hot at the end of the year, stayed hot, ended up winning it all. So I think teams that are run through conference tournaments, we saw it with UConn the year they won it all with Kemba Walker. Teams that get through the conference tournaments, I think even Louisville, one of those years that they won the national championship, won their conference tournament. So I love teams that come off of conference tournament wins. The one worry can be a little bit worrisome as you play so many games in a short amount of time. So you might have to play 3 games the week before, have 4 days rest, and then you have to play 2 games in a 3-day period, the opening week of the tournament. So always be careful with those teams, but those teams always seem to do well for me. Unfortunately, those usually end up being favorites. So as far as against the spread betting, you have to be a little careful there because sometimes, because they have such good recent form, that the lines are way inflated.
We've talked about this before in the fact that you like teams with good guard play. Are there any other patterns or things that you see in common with teams that you really like heading into the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's 2 things. With good guard play, you get usually experience. Usually those come off of very experienced teams. And then I love experienced coaches. We've seen it over and over. Rick Pitino was unbelievable in the tournament. Of course, Tom Izzo has been really good in the tournament as a top seed, and even as a lower seed, we've seen him show up and get all the way to the Final Four. So when I'm talking about betting, and that's against the spread betting that we're talking, I love experienced guard play, experienced teams, and experienced coaches that have proven track records come the NCAA tournament time, especially if they're underdogs. I really then that gets me a second look. So I'm looking at an underdog that has experienced guard play, and usually what I would consider a coaching edge. If you just say the teams are even, which coach would you take? If those are underdogs, those are usually some of my top plays, especially the first opening 4 days of the NCAA tournament.
How much value do you place on there's not a home team in these games. They do have regions where it's a little bit of a closer drive for some of these teams, but it is a neutral site. How does that impact the way you bet some of these games?
Well, it's funny because you can be a little crazy because sometimes just because, say, Duke is playing in North Carolina somewhere, but guess what? A lot of people don't like Duke that are not from Duke. The Duke fans are still going to root for their teams, but the other teams actually start rooting for the underdog. So you can get maybe a little too carried away, especially the opening 2 days when you're going to have a much more divided crowd than you will, say, Sweet 16 and the Final Four.
How much stock do you put in teams that play well on the road? As I mentioned earlier, Creighton has 3 really solid road wins, Villanova, Seton Hall, and Marquette, and they just beat Butler. I don't know if that was on the road or not, but still a good road team. How much stock do you put in that?
It doesn't really concern me, especially because I just think being good on the road and being good at neutral sites sometimes can be two totally different things. I would much rather see teams that did well in the early season in these neutral site tournaments that we see, either in Maui or the Atlantis down in the Bahamas. I like that. Also, they were good, like we said, in conference tournaments, and that leads you to the hot teams. I love those type of teams. But to me, I would those teams usually get way overplayed. So sometimes you have to look at the value on that one.
All right, we're going to wrap up our March Madness talk. Thanks, Craig Trapp, for joining us. Also, your Dayton pick is a long shot, looking pretty good. They've won 16 in a row. We're talking more college basketball after the break on Picks and Parlays. Welcome back to Picks and Parlays on the Sports Byline Broadcast Network, also streaming on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm your host, Chelsa Messinger. You can find me on Twitter at Chelsa Messinger if you want to drop me a line, a pick, or a parlay. I'm open to all of those. Right now, we're jumping back into even more college basketball because it is that time of year. We've got Sean Higgs joining us to talk some of these daily games, not just the tournament, because there is basketball going on right now. You don't have to just do a bracket and jump in when it's March. You can do stuff now. How you doing, Sean? How are your plays going?
Not too bad, not too bad. And yes, March 3rd, conference tournament start up. So the madness is just a week and a half away, right around the corner. Conference tournaments, March 3rd. We got 3 of them starting up. It's crazy.
February flies by. I feel like January just creeps, and then February, obviously it's a shorter month. I know, but
we got an extra day this year.
Do we have a leap year?
Is it the 29th? Yeah, I think there's a 29th. Yeah.
I haven't even looked.
I just like, it's just nothing going on in February. So let's just move on to March Madness, and then we got baseball, and then you got preseason football. Then it's August. It's Christmas time.
Yeah.
You're getting, the Christmas tree ready, and the new sweet little baby girl's gonna have a nice little Santa outfit on. It'll be fun.
Wow, we've got a synopsis of the entire year in 10
seconds. I'm ready for 2021. It's right around the corner. You're gonna blink. It's gonna be.
We just started 2020.
I block it off in pairs. So to me, it's really like mid-August right now. To me, right now, I'm getting ready for a new school year with my kids.
All right, we've got to reel you back in because we've got to talk a little college hoops. Let's start in the ACC with Louisville, Florida State. Florida State home favorites in this one, -2.5. Total is 141. Louisville 23-5 on the season, 14-13-1 against the spread with wins over North Carolina and Syracuse. But before that, they lost to some bad teams, Clemson and Georgia Tech. So who do we like in this one, or what is the play?
Well, Florida State's going for the sweep here. They beat them 78-65 in Louisville.
Yep.
And that's what happens. You shoot 55%, and the home team shoots 38%. You're going to win a lot of games. Again, these guys, Louisville sitting on top of the ACC. They got half-game leads over Duke and Florida State. I don't know, though. For me, I'm going to go look at the revenge angle. Louisville's still a top team. I don't throw much into credence. You see numbers in front of teams, but this is still a really good team. Florida State, 14-0 undefeated at home. I get it, but I'm going to lean one. I like the under. Louisville's going to bring the defense. We know that. I don't think they're going to shoot 38%. I don't think Florida State's shooting 55%. We're going to get more of a like a regular kind of game here in the 40s. But I'm going to go under the 141. Actually, I think I see 140.5 right now, so touchdown a notch, but maybe even a little lean on Louisville. I think Louisville's going to split the series. When teams are really good, they're going to split out. Let's be honest. It's really tough to just beat up on really good teams, and these are two premier teams. Let's not kid ourselves. These guys could be in the Final Four in a month from now, whatever it is. So I'm going to lean on the Cards, but I'm going to play on the under here, get the best number. Again, I said it's tricking down here to 140.5, but let's go under in Florida State, Louisville.
Right. The thing that stuck out to me that you kind of touched on was the last time that they played, Florida State shot 47% from the three-point line. That's outrageous. Yeah. And they shot 55% field goal percentage. Overall. I mean, they were shooting the lights out.
That's good to do at home. Do it on the road against a normally tough defensive team. So that's tough to repeat. there. So that's why I basically like the under here. I don't think you'll see that kind of shooting from either team. I mean, those are rarities against top 10 teams come out and shoot like that. I mean, 47% from three. Mm-hmm. Come on, what is this? This is ACC basketball. This isn't them playing Mount St. Mary's on November 19th or something. This is top tier basketball.
Also, you mentioned Florida State is undefeated at home, 14-0, which is incredible. But they're only 6-8 against the spread at home, which is what we're playing on. Because you can win, but you might not cover, even though it is a small number.
It is a small number, and you look into those things. So, you look at the spreads, people. Look at some of these numbers. I mean, a lot of times they might be laying big double digits to teams, so you got to take those with a grain of salt. You got to see kind of how the numbers play into that. Like at a 2.5, if you like Florida State here, I'd say bet the money line because everyone thinks it's gonna be a close game. It could be a bucket game. So at 2.5, if you want Florida State, I'd say money line. But I'm dogging it up here. Let's go.
All right, let's move on to West Virginia, Texas. West Virginia favored in this one, -4.5. Total is 127. Texas is averaging just 64 points per game, 5-10 against the spread at home. Not great. They've covered in the last two with 2 wins straight up, most recently with a win over K-State as a 5.5-point underdog. What's the play on this one?
Yeah, 2 straight wins, K-State and TCU. They finally scored some points, putting up 70 in both of those games. But prior to that, in 4 straight, they didn't get more than 57 points. And that includes getting smacked in West Virginia by 38 and losing by 29 to Iowa State. Obviously, some problems here. I think Shaka for Texas, Shaka Smart. I don't know if he's going to make it through next year. This is it. I think he's going to be out. I think Texas will probably make a change. It's tough. I like West Virginia. I like the Huggy Bear. It's tough laying a 4.5 here. These guys can't hit free throws or threes. They can't. They're bad shooting. I see 60% free throw shooting. I just lose my mind. I mean, how hard is it? This is a shot that, my 12-year-old sits and their basketball coach in rec league makes them shoot until they hit 5 in a row. I mean, come on, guys, hit a free throw. So that's a little worrisome when I take a road phase, especially in conference play. But the way they play defense, top notch. West Virginia always brings it. The lack of scoring, even though they did put up 7 in the last 2 games, overall on the season, Texas has not been scoring well. So West Virginia, right the ship. You got to get back on the track here. You're a good team. Tournament's coming up. Get some wins under your belt. You're supposed to beat bad teams. Texas is not a good team. Let's go West Virginia. We'll lay the 4.5. Total wise, I don't know. I kind of like the under, but 125 is a low one. I don't think it's going to be a that's really close to number. I'll stay away from that, but definitely West Virginia 4.5 here for me.
All right, next up, we've got Nebraska and Illinois. The Fighting Illini are minus 13.5 in this one. Total is 144.5. Illinois coming off a big win over number 9 Penn State to snap a 4-game losing streak. But speaking of losing streaks, Nebraska has lost 11 in a row. Granted, they don't have to win this one to cover, but is 13.5 too many points to give this terrible Nebraska team?
There, Chelsea. Nebraska 2-13 in Big Ten play, and Northwestern 1-15. I mean, are you kidding me? They talk about this Big Ten like it's the best thing since sliced bread. 2 teams contributed 28 wins to all the other teams in the conference. Terrible. I'm going to lay the big. I've talked about this. They're talking about 10 teams. I wrote them all down in their conference records. Okay, I'll be happy if Rutgers makes it a 500 record in Big Ten. Good for them. But Nebraska, high hopes to start the year. They're supposed to be better. A train wreck. Illinois, on the other hand, 12-21 last year. They're going to flip that record. They're 17-9 right now. I'm going to lay it. I'm going to lay the big number. It's not like they have a big game on deck. Northwestern on deck. As I said, 1-15 in Big Ten play. That's a game we might want to look to fade next game up because they got Indiana in a revenge spot. Here, take care of business. You're healthy. You're playing well. Remember, these guys ran off 7 straight in Big Ten play in January. So they're capable. When they're on. They're as good as anybody in the country. So I think with everybody back here, 2 bad teams coming in, take care of business. Lay the big number here. Illini, let's go.
All right, and finally, we've got Oklahoma State and Kansas. Kansas big favorites in this one, minus 15. Total is 134. The last time we talked, you took Kansas over Iowa State to cover another big number. I believe it was maybe 15.5, and they covered it.
15,
they've covered some big spreads. They've covered against Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and Texas, all double-digit spreads that they covered. But they are coming off that big win over Baylor, number 1 team in the country. So the opposite of a look ahead, I guess a letdown spot, and maybe that's a factor here.
And again, it's like, is it a square play saying it's a letdown spot? I mean, you're just in a 64-61 battle with Baylor. You got your revenge for a bad home loss. Now you're tied at the top. I mean, Oklahoma State's not a good team. But I don't know if I can lay the 15 here. I think this is a game where they're just kind of go through the motions a little bit. Again, it's a cheesy thing to say letdown spot. And you're like, well, they want to come out and win. They could still win this game by 12 or 13 points. Doesn't mean they're going to cover a double-digit win. I think Oklahoma State's going to want to show up. They're having a bad year. Why not come in and try to play the number 1 team in the country pretty tough? I'll take the 15 with the dog here. I think it'll only go up to. I think people probably take Kansas. They love Kansas. They see the big number 1 in front of them. That'll be when the new rankings come out. So I'm going to dog it up here. Kind of a square play in betting circles when you have the whole letdown and you just played a good team. But that's the way I'm looking at it. I mean, come on, where's the emotion after that game? That's a huge win. Nowhere to go but down after that. So I reluctantly taking a 15 here with the dog. But again, it's gonna be a TV game. You're playing against a top team. Play up a little bit. You're having a terrible year. You never know. We saw San Diego State got knocked off at home. We saw Gonzaga lose. We see Duke lose. Teams lose sometimes. You never know what's going to happen. It's been a wild year. Like Craig hit it on the head. It's been a crazy year, and it's only going to get wilder as March approaches. So let's dog it up here. Plus 15.
Right. And plus, what does Kansas even have to prove? I mean, they need to win it, but they've almost wrapped up a number 1 seed by beating Baylor. So I'm not sure what they have to prove here. I guess we're running out of time. Sean Higgs, thanks for joining us. So always good
Thanks for
stuff
having us.
When it comes to college basketball. When we get back from the break on Picks and Parlays, we're talking NBA on Picks and Parlays. Stick with us. And we are back on Picks and Parlays on the Sports Byline Broadcast Network, also streaming on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you search Picks and Parlays, we're really easy to find if you want to tune in that way, or if you want to check us out, drop us a line. Also, you can visit our website, picksandparlays.net, for all of your sports betting needs. I'm your host, Chelsa Messinger, and so far on the show, we've covered quite a lot of basketball. College hoops, to be exact. Right now, we're moving on to NBA. It is mid-season. I guess it's past mid-season. We've already had the All-Star break. We're starting to figure out who of these teams are real, who are pretenders, and who we can trust with our money. Right now, we're joined, by Tony T out on the West Coast. Tony T, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, Chelsea. I know in your open you talked about all these totals, the numbers up so high, and what's happened in this league, it's become a younger league. We're seeing players come in the NBA at 18 and 19-year-olds, and they're getting a lot of minutes. Their bodies aren't fully developed for a physical type of defense. So the coaches say, well, for us to be competing with these young guys in their early 20s, in their late teens, let's run up and down the court, create a fast pace, and run out these 30-somethings out of the league. And this is what you're seeing here is just fast-paced basketball, not a lot of defense, and a lot of coaches forgiving their young stars for not defending. That's why we're seeing these totals up. And of course, the three-point shot creates long rebounds and, of course, fast breaks on the other end of the court.
Right. It's a completely different brand of basketball than it used to be. We're seeing not only a lot more threes, but a lot of almost half-court threes. Guys are taking threes. It's just heat checks all over the place. And as you mentioned, these totals are looking outrageous, but just when they look outrageous, they hit the over. Speaking of, let's start with the Bucks and the Wizards. The Bucks are favored minus 12.5 on the road. The total is 240.5. 240.5. That's a lot of points, but as I mentioned in the open, the last time these teams met, it was 151 to 131. So are you leaning on the total, or do you like the spread in this one?
It's a lot of points to lay with Milwaukee. This is going to be a back-to-back spot for Wizards. They just gave 73 points in the first half against a Bulls team without their scorers in the lineup. So this tells you how bad it's gone for Wizards this year defensively. But I'm going to go ahead and lay the 12 or 12.5 with these Bucks. So they've won 8 of their past 10, each win coming by 11 or greater points. That's the key. They're just pounding teams. Since the break, the Bucks go into Detroit, win by 20, then beat the 76ers by 21 at home. Their offensive form is good. This is what you want to do when you're laying points. Make sure the team can play defense. They are. The past 5 games, 42%, 31% from 3. Of course, the Bucks with a day of rest facing teams with no rest. They've covered 5 of 7. Number 1 in defensive efficiency are the Bucks, third offensively. And look at the Wizards, last in defensive efficiency in the league. You just got to lay the points with Milwaukee. I laid it with them on that Saturday game against Philadelphia. So as long as they're pounding teams, I'm just going to continue with them.
Right. They've covered in 7 of their last 8 games. So recently, they've been a good team to bet on. Let's move on to the Knicks and the Rockets. The Rockets are favored in this one, minus 14. Total is 229.5. As we've mentioned on the show plenty of times, the Rockets have really embraced small ball. They don't have a starting player that's over 6'7" or 6'6". James Harden's been doing a lot of the jump balls. However, they're 6-2 against the spread in their last 8, and they're the NBA's second highest scoring offense. So who do we like in this one? The Rockets or the Knicks, who have been a dismal team overall, 17-39. But against the spread, they have a winning record.
Yeah, that's true with this small ball. I know it's a family show. I won't use their nickname, but the small ball that the Houston Rockets are playing here. I'm gonna go ahead and I know I got a chuckle out of Chelsea on that one. I'm gonna go ahead and take the Knicks here plus the 14. They've covered 5 of their past 6 visits to Houston and covered 5 straight on the road with a straight up win in Indiana. But you know what? This could be a real flat spot for Houston. Coming in against an Eastern Conference team after picking up wins by 30 at Golden State, 10 at Utah. Looking at the Rockets' defensive form, look at their past 5 games, allowing 49% shooting. Houston, since going to that smaller lineup, they're getting beat up night in and night out on the glass. At some point, that's going to cost them. Here with that combination of poor defense, poor rebounding, covering a huge spread could be problematic here. I'll go ahead and take the 14 with New York in this one.
You say this is a family show, but I don't know if it is. Have you heard what Chip says on the air sometimes? I know he's not.
I know. Chip's on a different. Sometimes Chip's on a little different planet once in a while. It's his birthday today, by the way. Happy birthday to Chip! I got that Facebook notification that it's his birthday.
Oh, a fellow Pisces. My birthday was last week. It's funny how some people really take a lot of account into zodiac signs. I'm going to name drop for a second. Hank Aaron, when I met him, I did a story with him. That's the first thing he asked. He was like, "What's your zodiac sign?" I was like, Hank Aaron just asked for my zodiac sign? What an odd thing to ask. But he's a fellow Pisces as well. And yes, we just went on a weird tangent, and I'll reel it back in. Let's go. Suns, Jazz. Jazz are favored in this one, -7.5. Total is 223.5. Suns 23-34 on the year, 26-30-1 against the spread. They actually have a better record against the spread on the road than they do at home. The Jazz, one of the better teams in the West, 36-20, 20-7 at home. Who do we like in this one?
Yeah, I'm going to go here with the under 223.5. The Suns have played the under in 4 straight. They have both their 2 big rim defenders back together. That's DeAndre Ayton and Aaron Baines. The teams have played the under in 4 of their past 5 head-to-head in Utah. Both teams playing their 3rd game in 4 nights. Look at the past 2 games against contenders. The Suns have been held to just 101 points to Utah, 100 at the Lakers. Utah showing signs of struggling offensively, just averaging 107 points per game in their home losses to the Rockets and Spurs. These are both teams who are not very strong defensively. And the Suns, they have not shot the ball well over their past 5 games, just 43%, but 30% from 3. I'm going to go under here, Chelsea, under 223.5 with the Suns and the Utah Jazz.
All right, next up, we have the Orlando Magic and the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets are -3 at home in this one. Total is 212.5. As most of you probably know, Kyrie Irving now out for the year. But somehow Brooklyn's been able to cover some of these games, as I've noticed they're losing some people money. But who do we like in this one, or what's the lane?
Yeah, I can only look here at Brooklyn -3. It's really tough to back the Magic. They're 9-18 straight up on the road. They're the worst shooting team in the NBA, 2nd worst from 3. Orlando, they failed to cover 7 straight as an underdog after that 16-point home loss to Dallas. That's coming off the break. You look at the defensive form for Orlando, not very good. The last 5 games allowing 48% shooting, 39% from 3. Yes, Kyrie Irving's out of lineup, but they've covered 8 of 10 after a 29-point road win at Charlotte on Saturday. Dinwiddie and company, they just seem to be getting it done. They're distributing the ball. They play the defense. And of course, we knew the Nets were a very good cover team last year. That was without Kyrie. Kyrie Irving might have, I don't know what his influence was like on the team. Now that he's gone, the Nets are covering like they did last year. I'll go ahead and lay it here with Brooklyn.
Right. I think I saw somewhere where the Nets actually have a better record without Kyrie, which obviously I'm not saying that Kyrie is a bad player, but for some reason or another, they're finding ways to win games and actually cover.
Yeah, that's correct. They do. And again, it comes down to the fact that Kyrie holds the ball quite a bit. He's the focal point of the offense. And I think with this lineup here, you see a little bit more ball distribution. Sometimes the coach can implement his strategies, game plans a little more when you basically share the basketball and play as a team. Of course, we know what Kyrie Irving's issues were in Boston last year. That's one of the reasons why they didn't keep him, right? We're not, right now, there's really not much tension with this Celtic team. They covered against the Lakers on Sunday. And, you can see how much better Boston looks right now during this regular season without Curry on the lineup. And, of course, the Nets covering without him.
Well, and also the Celtics have Kemba, who is, I'm not going to say he's as good as Kyrie, but he's pretty close without some of the diva problems, I guess. I know some people were saying he's hard to work with, but I think
I think what happens. I think what happens sometimes, Chelsea, is that when you call out players and you speak negatively about your team, that really impacts the younger players. And it's no doubt that, in Boston, some of the younger players had difficulty mixing in with his personality. And I think what happens when you have that reputation, you come in, everyone seems to be a little apprehensive, kind of walking on eggshells, not knowing how to get on his good side. I think a lot of that plays into the fact with playing with Kyrie after he created all that on his own in that time he had in Boston.
Right. Just to kind of recap for the second half of the season, some of your leans when it comes to betting these NBA games, I know you talk about teams that are coming off back-to-backs. What are some other patterns you look for when betting some of these games?
Yeah, one thing you noticed there was the travel, especially with some of these East and West Coast teams. When they play an East Coast team playing out West and vice versa. I always look to play against teams that are coming back from long road trips. Like let's say they have on the road for six days or 6 games, and they play at first home game. Usually they get 1 day off. That's usually a flat spot, definitely a go against. And one thing to note here for those Midwest teams, these Midwest teams play a lot of 1-game homestands. Like they'll play 2 games on the road, come back for 1, then play 3 games on the road. That home game now becomes a road game, which means they got to come home and play the home game, travel again. That's like a road game. So I don't count that as a home game. We saw Oklahoma City last year really tank because they had 3 sets of 1-game homestands late in the season, and it was really infecting their play. And that's one of the reasons why they struggled down the stretch. So for those Midwest teams, look for those 1-game homestands. If they play a lot of those, that means they're coming home for 1 game and pack it up and leave again. That takes a lot of toll on teams.
Are there any teams that you're really high on this year when it comes to betting on them? Obviously, every game is different, and you need to take each situation day by day. But are there any teams that have covered really well for you? You mentioned the Nets last year. I know the Thunder have covered a lot of games. Are there any teams that really stand out to you?
Yeah, the team that really, as you mentioned, the Thunder on the road has been a team that's been really good money here to play on. And of course, when you're looking at totals, well, actually teams that have been good go against have been Cleveland and Detroit. Let's talk about Detroit Pistons there for a second. This is a team that, they lose Markieff Morris. They're sitting out some of the star players. We use the word tanking. This may be one of the teams that look like to look to go against, as they've just been pounded on the court here of late. Of course, the big man Blake Griffin is out, and this is the team here. Detroit may be one that you look to go against. Minnesota Timberwolves is another team that has played very poorly, especially with the injury here to Karl Anthony Towns. They're vulnerable to a lot of overs, and they were on pace to go over again tonight. So that might be one to look at. The Timberwolves going over the total. And keep an eye on Houston when they play a team. Houston when they play a team a second time, they may be a go against once teams figure them out.
We've got a little time. We've got like a minute and a half. Just interested. Who do you like in March Madness? I know you are so well versed in everything, basketball, college basketball. Anybody you like?
Yeah, obviously I was looking at Gonzaga did suffer that loss at BYU. They were one of my teams to look at in March Madness. I think an underdog that I'll keep an eye on is UCLA, because UCLA is starting to win. I'm just talking about teams you can make money in the first and 2 rounds of the tournament. Some of the favorites are going to have trouble because sometimes they win and don't cover. But teams that you can bet on early rounds, one would definitely be UCLA Bruins, because their defensive style and they're starting to come on right now.
Tony T, big West Coast guy.
Finally, we got something to talk about out here. I know our producer would love to hear that, but it's happening, believe it or not. We were bashing UCLA not in football or in college basketball. I'm sure he got his attention.
Well, and now the Lakers are back to prominence as well, so that's always fun. Good for basketball. We want to thank Tony T for joining us. Always good stuff from Tony. And we will be back after the break on Picks and Parlays, wrapping up all of today's picks. Stick with us. Picks and Parlays on the Sports Byline Broadcast Network, also streaming on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm your host, Chelsa Messinger. You can find me every day on Twitter. If you want to search me, you can search my name, or you can just type in my name for my handle. It's Chelsa Messinger. Also, check us out on all of your favorite social media platforms. Picks and Parlays, really easy to find. Right now, we're going to run down all of our picks from the day in case you weren't listening, or in case you just need a little refresher. Starting off with some tips for betting March Madness from Craig Trapp. First of all, don't put too much stock in your bracket. Don't let your bracket picks cloud your judgment when it comes to game-by-game betting. Second of all, underdogs. Not only can you get a lot of value, but sometimes they actually win. totals. Be careful. It's a little different when you bet the tournament. And also check out the coaching and the experienced teams when it comes to the tournament. It does matter. And also momentum, the hot teams, the teams that are getting hot at the right time. And also, we've mentioned this is the most wide open year we've seen. And Creighton is our long shot play, or Craig's long shot play. Moving on to our daily basketball picks from Sean Higgs. He likes Louisville, Florida State. He likes the under in that one. West Virginia, Texas, taking the under. And West Virginia at -4.5. Nebraska, Illinois, taking the Fighting Illini at -13.5. Oklahoma State, Kansas, taking Oklahoma State to cover +15. And finally, NBA picks. Bucks Wizards take the Bucks -12. Magic Nets take the Nets -3. And Knicks Rockets take the Knicks +14. Suns at Jazz take the under 223.5 as the play on that one. It's been a great show. You can join us every weekday for all of your sports betting needs. Also, check out our website, picksandparlays.net, for even more. And that's going to wrap it up for our show. Thanks for joining us. That's Picks and Parlays. Until next time, see you guys later.